The people on Unranked are terrible. But what's worse is that I think we've all become worse as a community, and the community itself has been diving headlong into hell as time has gone on. I don't make this statement lightly. This is something I've come to realize from my 8 years of playing this game. You'd think that maybe I'm a toxic person, or that I'm too competitive, or maybe not competitive enough. But really, I'm like anyone else that loves this game. Unfortunately, the game itself has become worse over time, and it's at this point in Melee that I find it to be a terrible experience. A bit of backstory on me. I'm someone that watched the doc around 2016, fell in love with the storylines. I then played the game and found myself to love it. I, like many, played the game when I was a kid, but when I tried my hand at learning the advanced tech and trying to play against my friends on more serious terms, I'd found myself loving the competitive nature of the game as well. I was never really a competitive person, but then I found a drive for competition in Melee. This led me to play Anther's Ladder a lot back in the day, as there wasn't a scene for my region at all. Then when Slippy came out, and I started to stream Melee, I actually made some Melee friends for the first time. I also started entering tournaments for the first time ever because of Slippy, as I didn't really want to travel across state to go to a local where I knew no one. As it stands today, I have found myself in a nice place in the community. I've streamed and commentated online tournaments, and I have many friends in multiple states that if I ever did want to go to a LAN, that I could go with them. I don't think I've made any friends in my own state, or at least I might have forgotten where some of my friends live, but I do feel like I have plenty of places where I can feel at home. So I don't mean to say that everyone is terrible, but I think we aren't doing good as a community. To start, I want to talk about Unranked and how people are playing more often. Ego is always a big thing when it comes to competitors, but why so many people have one on Unranked is beyond me. Unranked should be a place where you do whatever you want and no one should care. It's not a tournament after all. I would think we as Melee players consider tournaments to be the most important thing when it comes to checking our skill. I say this because I believe that everyone that plays Melee is a hardcore competitor. If I'm wrong about that, then I would still think Unranked, of all places, isn't the place to be competitive. So even those non-competitive Melee players should be able to rest assured that they can have a good time playing there. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the case. When I was younger, I used to love coming home from school and playing Halo 3 or Modern Warfare 2 on my Xbox 360, hop into a matchmaking lobby and just play for hours. With Melee, I used to do the same, but instead, I'll run into people that will take one stock, taunt, and disconnect. Another person, take one stock, taunt, pick a new character, taunt, then disconnect. Like, these people don't ever want to play the game. I don't know why they do it. I don't know why they decide to even play the game at all. I've had them be anywhere from Fox players to Mario players. Because of it being like that wide of a range across characters, I fear a deeper problem might be occurring, but I'll get to more of that later. Another type of player is one that is my own personal hell, and one of the reasons why I decided to write this whole piece. They don't seem like the best players, but they spam the same options over and over again, and it's easy to guess that one of those options is grab. Shield grab as well, of course, but it's not just grab, but this is a core issue that I want to talk about, and I think it's more easily explained through grab, as it is one of the worst things people spam. That's why I want to talk about that specifically, but don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and make a whole case about a single game mechanic and say that it's bullshit. Like, I'm not saying we should get rid of grab or have a grab limit or whatever. Grab is a great tool, and, you know, one that's vital for any character, especially lower tier characters to use in order to start combos or get kills with or whatever. But when I play against players that just grab all the time, it's just one of the worst things that happen to me as a player. Like, Do I get mad? I do somewhat. You know, it's frustrating to get grabbed all the time and have that be like the only interaction you have to deal with constantly. So like I don't know who likes to play like that. I can play around grabs. So as far as that goes, it's not the biggest deal. It's just I feel like getting mad isn't the problem, but something worse happens, and that thing is that I get bored. So, and it's weird because I would never have thought that after playing Melee for 8 years, that someday I would get bored of this game. But sadly, I think it's come to pass. So it's boring, and yes, grab is a flat-out lame option to spam all the time. Mix that in with someone that just likes to run away from you and not approach you, and you have the ultimate boring game of Melee. Like, I'll grab you, and then I'll do a little combo, and then I'll run away. Or I won't do anything. Or I'll wait for you to come to me. And then I'll grab you when you come to me. It's like, why do you even want to deal? Like, come on, just like, play me, fight me. I don't know. Like, and I have to, like, I have to say again, I am a competitive person, and I have played in a lot of tournaments, but this specifically is like on Slippy Unranked. And while I believe you should be able to play however you want to on Unranked, I also believe that's like a fucking shame you choose to play so lame and boring. Like, this is a little bit, I'm being a little bit of a hater here, but pick a fucking, do something else. Like, I don't know. A lot of the time when I meet these players, I do play them. I either beat them consistently or I'll struggle against them. There really is no like middle ground here. But it really depends on how good they are as a player and how good I'm playing that day, maybe. You know, and to that point, the better they are, the less boring, because they don't end up grabbing, approaching, or comboing the same way all the time. Like, I'm sure if I played someone like Kodoran, who spams the fuck out of grab constantly, I'm sure maybe he would be more enjoyable to play against. So maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. I really want to emphasize where I'm coming from this. I don't want the value of a friendly, at least that's what I think Unranked is supposed to be turned into a tournament setting where instead of having fun or even de-stressing, I have to try hard against someone that only grabs me, or else I'll be bored. So after a long day's work, I get to come home and either be bored while playing my favorite game, or become stressed like I'm in a tournament for no reason in my favorite game. At this moment, I would like to tell everybody that has the thought of saying, just turn the game off. It's just a game. If you're stressed, then play something else. Just to shut the hell up. Just shut up. Like, I either have to play in a pop-up tournament Unranked or just leave. I don't want to do either. And I don't want to be rude, you know? Like, I'm not just going to take one stock taunt and leave because I got grabbed 5 times in a row. Like, I'm not someone that just connects and then disconnects if I don't get the matchup I want. Like, I've done it before, but I really don't like doing it. It feels like I could be missing out on someone fun to play with when I do that. But I've done it to possibly avoid people that just fucking grab all the time. But this and that countermeasure, like, I don't want to implement that. So for the most part, I don't. And I think the game at its core should be fun. This might be you thinking, well, there he is, not as competitive as I would like to be. But once again, I'm just talking about Unranked. But I'm sure we've all felt at some point that we can communicate our play, like what we're thinking and what we've read into our opponent's mind as well. Like we connect that between, like we connect ourselves between those players and stuff. And I feel like I've done that plenty of times on Unranked. So missing out on that is a sad thing to think about. Like a new friend? Nope, not anymore. I'll just skip because so many people ruin the fucking game by playing it terribly. Or just, you know, being too competitive. Like going back to what I said earlier about believing everyone should be able to play Unranked however they like. You might be thinking I'm contradicting myself a bit by saying people choose to play lame and they're ruining the game, even though I should be okay with how they play. I need to be clear that I do believe people should play however they want to on Ranked. However, I don't have to sit there through it and play with you either. Like, I don't always have people to play with whenever I want. I am probably going to start connecting with friends more often. Get away from these people. Not just the lame spamming types, but also the ego children as well. But because I choose the option to skip and let you play whoever you want, well, I don't have to like it, or whether I choose to play directly with a friend, I'm opting out specifically of how you play the game. I honestly wondered before writing this if I was creating a problem in the community by my own actions of being unwilling to play with someone. If I met this person in LAN and they played like this with me in a friendly, would I do the same? Would I walk away after one game? I don't really know. Like I've said, I've never been to a LAN. I've heard people mention that LANs are so much more different than online and they're so much better. So I'm really hoping that's the case. But I think a problem that's causing that's causing this is people being too competitive. Competition shouldn't be at the cost of other things. We can all sit here and look at like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan and think about how they sacrificed everything and worked harder than anyone to achieve their greatness. Sure, yeah, we can think that, but they also had families and made millions of dollars. So while we all struggle to afford rent in this collapsing economy, we can be happy that we got 7th in an online tournament that we grinded for the past 3 weeks while not going outside and hanging with friends, right? I mean, I've known people that started playing this game because of the high skill level of what we all consider basic movement mechanics now, once you move past that, but that simple tech being such a big barrier of entry, like they quit or they got bored. Like, even though they seemed interested, even though they like tried for 6 months, with the game being so hard by itself, like I try when I meet new players to help them along. I remember when I first started playing myself and I only had friends that, they didn't care about the game. So when I think about new players, like I try to help because I want those new players to have fun and I want the learning environment to be fun and be rewarding and like, I want it to be homey. I want them to have a good time because I want to say like maybe that 6 months to a year period where you're learning these really hard mechanics and you're just trying to, like you're just a baby trying to learn how to walk. Once you get past that, you can run. So, so whenever I meet players, that are new, I try and help them along as much as I can, or, I at least try and be understanding. But if the game itself wasn't hard enough to get in by its gatekeeping skill level for the casual player, it's worse when you consider the people you decide to meet on Unranked. Like, I'm sure we've all had the girlfriend that is into our hobbies or something. We've had our significant other be like, "Oh, you play Melee? Oh, that's cool. Let me try and play with you." And I'm like, "Don't do that. You're not gonna have fun." She's like, "Oh, why not? I wanna bond with you." I'm like, "Okay." And they play or whatever, and then what if they go on Unranked and they meet the person that I'm talking about that is just an ass hat, They're not good enough to win tournaments, but they'll be on here and they'll just try and humiliate you through what should be a friendly on Unranked, That's the only way to stroke their egos, So for any future girlfriends or or boyfriends out there, for any players that want to bond, have that bonding experience, or just for any new players, I'm sorry that you get discouraged because of people like that. To those new people out there, just find some friends and stick with them and grind with them all the time. That's much better than being on Unranked. Understand this isn't a problem that just exists on Unranked. It's one that exists in the scene itself because we push ourselves to be overly competitive. There are always people out there that will join in and make things better for those newcomers, like tournaments for only new players and spaces for new players to play, right? I want the scene to grow, but honestly, we can't act like we don't make it hard for them, you know? Like, this comes to another point about the scene as a whole. And really, the major thing about why I decided to write this, apart from just being mad at Slippy Unranked, our community is not for everyone. I'm not saying we aren't inclusive, and I'm not specifically talking about the point I just made about us being overly competitive. But I mean, we are a niche as a community. We are a niche in fighting games, and we are a niche in esports. We've been around for a long time, and for good or bad, we've made a name for ourselves. But we will never be a mass appeal to people. And there are multiple reasons for this. The obviously is probably because of Nintendo. So, you know, I'm really not even going to get into all of that. That would be like its own video. But in reality, I believe it's our own faults. We like to think that we're all about community and we come together in great times of need, and Melee will never die. Melee probably won't ever die, not because we actually do good for the scene, but because we're all obsessed. When I say we don't do anything good for the actual scene, I mean we have no structure to anything. We are grassroots to the core. The biggest people behind the scenes are tournament organizers that actually keep the scene alive by hosting tournaments. If it weren't for them, Melee would be dead. Like, we can all sit here and say, you know, what's the thing Mango says? The back alley of 7-Eleven, me and Zane, grand finals, 3 people there or whatever. I don't believe that for a second. A massive portion of the Melee audience either just play online or just watch streams. Not a lot are competitors that go to enter these tournaments. Supernova, formerly known as SmashCon, just wrapped up this August, and they had 4,388 attendees across all Smash titles. Now, this is a major that I would assume would have a lot more. Even when we look at a super major like Genesis X, there were 4,786 competitors, which is only a difference of 398 people. As far as online viewership goes, we used to have way bigger numbers than we do now. A big reason for that is due to us not being featured as a game in EVO anymore. We took a real big hit when that happened. Our peak viewership was around that time, coming in at like 190K. But steadily over the past 8 years, it's been declining. I might get his name wrong, so please forgive me. Anok Edward, otherwise known as Edward Budding Palakuthri. He is on the Melee Stats podcast, and he writes. He has a series that he writes called Monday Morning Marth on the Melee Stats website. Edward Budding writes, Melee's viewership decline is far more tragic than you might think. At the start of the 2020s, we were creeping up to EVO era levels of spectatorship. It only came crashing down right after Nintendo fucked everything up. You can't possibly look at the truth and not feel tremendously bitter. He goes on to be positive in his article and even offers suggestions on how to change these numbers and also provide insight into how they already might be changing. And I'll be linking the article below, but here is the chart that shows the decrease in viewership over those years. Just this past July, a lot of you may be aware that the long-running super major known as the Big House has gone on an indefinite hiatus. A post was made on July 9th on the Big House website by head organizer Robin Jungle Guy HARN, talking about personal updates and reasons why the ability to host the next installment of the Big House would not be happening. Among those reasons, besides some of the personal ones, he states that with each recent installment of Big House, it's become increasingly difficult to find sponsors and partners willing to financially back the event and our general attendance has hit a plateau of around 3,000 people. This is hard to think about, as Big House has always been one of my personal favorite tournaments besides Smash Summit. He goes on to say, the combination of these factors makes it increasingly difficult to host a large-scale event at the creative level I want. When organizations like Panda, Beyond the Summit, and Golden Guardians go away, it has unfortunate ripples on the events like Big House. I think Jungle Guy is touching on something a lot of people never think about when it comes to tournaments. What does it take to get these people to show up? What does it take to keep them coming all the time? What does it take for a TO to actually get a tournament going, get sponsors, and keep the lights on? Is there a way we can help? Is there a way to grow the scene without Nintendo coming down on us? A lot of other esports orgs don't have to worry about the game's developer with these matters. Counter-Strike is a global esport that amasses huge audiences around the world. The game's developer Valve not only helps with tournament organizing and giving TOs the ability to use in-game console commands to alter camera functionality and give other tools, but they also actively make a point to set the rules for the game itself, acting as the game's commissioner. If there was something I think Melee would benefit from greatly, it's somebody that can be the scene's overall commissioner. We are the most dysfunctional and disorganized esport, and it's crazy to think we've lasted so long just on the backs of TOs. We aren't doing anything that centralizes rules. For example, we have a box and controller problem that's been going on for years now. Should GOOM, WAVE, /FOBs be illegal? And what about box-type controllers? Going back to Counter-Strike, there was recently a new keyboard that was released that could help you with counter-strafing in the game. For those that aren't aware, counter-strafing is done when letting go of one movement key while strafing and quickly pressing the opposite direction to stop yourself quickly. Okay? The new keyboard was making it to where lag between the pressing of those keys would be eliminated. Okay? Thus creating an easier and faster way to strafe. A lot of players didn't like the idea because it made it too easy, saying that counter-strafing is a part of the skill you learn to play the game because there's a timing involved. Once upon a time, there was a console command for the game where you could implement the same feature, and it was banned by Valve. Okay, so once this keyboard came out for purchase, it took Valve 2 weeks or so to make a decision banning that keyboard. Meanwhile, we can't decide what controllers we can or can't use. Another problem that I think is just pathetically dumb and makes the system fraudulent is how our ranking system seems to be based on opinions. I don't think I have to say what Mango thinks about them, as we know he's complained about the 2022 rankings for being ranked under AMSA, which he says was due to some of the voters thinking, in quotes, Yoshi is a really hard character, end quote. Or even when Mango has complained about how little Leffen has entered in recent years and won, but still being within the top 10, or even being on the list in the first place. Only when Mango and others have complained enough did they make Leffen an honorable mention. To say that some people's opinions on characters or players instead of results would be a deciding factor is an inaccurate way to rank a player. Not to mention, there doesn't seem to be a legitimate way to do so in the first place, as this is what is listed about how they do rankings. We pulled 29 community figures to rate each ballot eligible player based on their performances throughout 2023. These panelists span a wide range: top players, tournament organizers, writers, analysts, and more. Each panelist rated each player with a value between 1 and 120, and then each player's rating was aggregated to a single value based on their distribution of votes. End quote. Are these community figures rating based on data, or just how they think they did in that year? If so, do things like matchups, head-to-heads, and the number of tournaments a player went to not factor in as the major data for voting? Or has it just become a popularity contest because AMSA had a really good year and Yoshi is such a hard character to play? Feel free to know where I'm wrong on this. As far as it looks, it's not a well-informed decision. Something else I think hurts the scene is our level of involvement with different ways to do tournaments. Online is a big way that a lot of people can be a part of with ease. I understand internet connectivity issues, but I don't think that's something we should just rule out as a possibility if it helps strengthen the scene. To add that, having a tournament ladder system I think would help, much like we tried using with Smash World Tour. I think having a system like that, maybe even just on a smaller scale or just online, or even both, would greatly benefit engagement and incentivize players to enter more tournaments. This is something I have very little knowledge of, just want to let everybody know. And I know that simply running a tournament isn't enough. Going back to what Jungle Guy said about his post, his Big House post on his website, he says, TOing events is still a passion project. I've never paid myself a salary for hosting events. Instead, always reinvesting towards making future events as great as possible for attendees. The truth is, there are way more expenses now than even 2 years ago, let alone 13 years ago when Big House first started. End quote. One thing that would alleviate this financial burden would be more advertisers. This is something that I know little about. Once again, sorry. And I've heard the community talk about this in the past, but I think it's something that any esports relies on. Besides entrance fees, of course, and there's only two ways to make money through that. Increase the amount of people coming in, or increase the amount people pay to get in. I think this is where we're hurting a lot. Like, Melee isn't growing like we need it to be. So the first option is out the window, and getting more people in. And the second option just creates a giant uproar. I think increasing the amount for majors is probably essential. I've seen these venues countless times during streams. They all look like big convention centers. Anytime I've ever been to a convention, like a Comic-Con, not a Melee tournament, I end up paying at least like $60 to enter for just a one-day pass. Thinking about a tournament being a 3-day event, a convention would probably charge around $100 or more for a 3-day pass. And when I think about it in terms like that, we're giving the community the cheapest options to come and watch. I understand wanting to keep things cheap, of course, but we should be able to support TOs like Jungle Guy and give him actual pay for putting on one of the best tournaments that's ever existed. Like, this is the guy keeping the scene alive, and now his tournament has gone on hiatus? I think this is part of the reason why companies like Beyond the Summit have had hard times existing in the scene. We don't make money for anyone. We can barely keep the top 10 players signed to an org because we don't make money for the orgs. We should be able to make more money for at least the top 50 players to have a salary, but once again, we'd have to surpass our label as a niche grassroots community. But a lot of orgs have trouble working with us because not only do we not help with money, we also don't give them any exposure or grow their name. Golden Guardians were around for a lot longer than I thought they would be. Having fans be interested in the content they made was going to be a bit of a reach for them. Maybe a bigger audience would enjoy it, more eyes, more criticism, more chances to make better content, that kind of thing. But again, I make the argument that other esports have done the same content-wise, like Golden Guardians and Counter-Strike, and they get a lot more views, but they also have a global audience. Still, though, it's a shame and something I would like to see if we ever grow to where we can keep an org like Golden Guardians around. I think the thing that hurts the most is how no one wants to do anything, and instead we all just sit around and talk. I know I've thought the same thing since writing this, because that's all I'm doing is talking, but I'm just not interested in the community as I once was. Like, we've fallen to a certain level. This is probably just a lot of feelings I've had over the years that I've needed to get out. I was going to write a section on hacks and how we could possibly avoid something like that in the future and help him, but I think there are probably limits to what we could do overall. Like, we like to think we provide a home for people in the community, but honestly, We can't afford the path we lay, nor the shoes we walk in. I thought about writing a section on like melee commentary and how maybe that's part of the problem too, to a certain extent. I don't really know exactly what I would say. There's not a lot of people that I think I don't like to listen to. You know, I think everybody does a good job. I think maybe if I had to, like I said, just go based on feelings and sentiment, in the past when I used to watch tournaments, I was much more excited, much more interested. And there are people, I think, today that are focused a lot more just on the game itself. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think there needs to be a mixture of both. I actually watched this interesting video the other day by this YouTuber named StarkDoes. I'll put a link to the video I'm talking about where he discusses what's going wrong with melee commentary. And he made some good points about how there used to be like duos and how there used to be more chemistry. And when you had these duos that had chemistry, then the commentary was better. So, you know, maybe that's all there is, you know, because I'm missing Scar and Toph and I'm missing Phil and Waff. So that's about it when it comes to commentary. I will say though, I'm gonna be a little bit mean. Maybe say one criticism, which I think it's important. Jorge, I love your energy. I love what you're bringing to the table here. But man, you gotta like stop yelling or something. Like I think that's the thing. Like I tune in immediately and I just hear this guy yelling like you sound like a crazy person, like, which is half good and half really hard to listen to and pay attention to a game. So, you know, keep that energy, man. Just stop yelling so much. I also saw a video recently that Mango was on the yard, and I'll post that video where he says, like, he says in the episode that back in the day, no one really played Melee that much, and it was more like of a homie thing. Like, maybe you'd play like really seriously for an hour, but you were hanging out with each other because you had to, because Slippy wasn't a thing. So you'd play really intensely for an hour, and then you'd be like, hey, let's go get some beers or something like that. And then you would relax and just play and have fun. And I think, and he goes on to make a point that Melee itself hasn't really started until Slippy came along. And I think I understand that sentiment, as we were too relaxed, but now we have the tools to be more serious and to grind harder and get better. And I wonder, after I wrote this, I saw that video, and I wonder that maybe what I'm saying with all this is that the scene has changed to where I don't like it anymore because of the competitiveness. You know, all the other reasons obviously stand, but I wonder if the competitiveness is something that we all focus on too much and that it brings us down. You know, let the top 100, I'll say, let the top 100 players worry about the competitive nature of the scene. You know, we have to find a place for the rest of us. Like, we're not all top 100 players. We all have to find a place for the rest of us, you know. And, you know, we can sit here as well. Going back to what I was saying, we can sit here and make fun of Leffen talking about an airtime limit because HBox doesn't approach. And we can sit here and talk about the timer, and we can sit here and talk about what to do with box controllers and all the other things I mentioned. But that's all we're ever going to do. You know, we're just going to sit here and do nothing. The scene itself is going to be stale because we refuse to change in ways that make an actual impact. You know, people are going to leave. Slippy is going to be shit, you know, and we're probably just never going to grow as a scene, or we're never going to be taken seriously either. You know, we've got to make the changes that are going to affect us in positive ways. Like I said, I don't know if my heart's in it anymore. And I think the same has been going on throughout Melee. I don't see the heart anymore. It feels like even writing this, it feels like I'm looking for a reason to stay in it, to stay alive, you know? And I don't want just that. You know, I don't want us to just stay alive. I want us to thrive. I want my passion to be there still and not be bored. But the final question that I'm going to ask is, can we change? Do we have the ability to do so?